Hello, everyone. My name's Darren Clark, and I'm the Managing Director of Succeed with Dyslexia. And we're back with another incredible guest for our interviews. We have an incredible guest every single week that we would like to kind of delve into kind of dyslexia and understand a little bit more about how they got involved with it, and also how we can learn from them. So without fail, I would like to introduce you to our incredible guest today. It's Olive. Olive, would you like to introduce yourself and tell the listeners a little bit about yourself?
Hello, and thank you for inviting me along, Darren. My name is Olive Hickmott, and I run a company called Empowering Learning. I would have been dyslexic if I hadn't been so old, because they hadn't invented it in my day. But I got to the end of school, I think it was when I was 18, and the school report said it would be helpful if Olive could learn to spell. And clearly, whatever they'd done, I was in a private school, I had been there for 14 years, and whatever they'd done hadn't worked. And so I went through life like that, and then I learnt, I sort of ignored the fact that there was some problem, because it was just like in those days, we hadn't invented dyslexia, and I would just go, well, this is just the way I am, etc., etc. When I was 50, I went on a course which was a neuro-linguistic programming, NLP, where they taught us in 10 minutes how people who are good at literacy do it. And it was a demonstration on the stage. I'm sitting there in the audience and going, you do what? Which was to look up and see words in your imagination, and then you can read them and then you can spell them. And I was just blown away by it. And so, me being me, I walked into my local special needs school, which happens to be half a mile up the road, the next day, and said, have you got anybody who can't spell? And they went, we've got hundreds. Which ones do you want? And I said, well, I think I've just learned something that might be useful. And so the rest is history. I've been teaching it ever since.
Wonderful. And so you said you would have been dyslexic had it kind of been the time around kind of the diagnosis side of it. That's one way of putting it. So when did you first kind of realize around your own kind of dyslexia, and how you kind of wanted to kind of help within with it, people with dyslexia?
It really was purely this course that I was on, which taught me that somebody else had a completely different experience of spelling to what I had. And so it's like, I'm a bit crazy. So it was like, I can't just leave that and just, okay, fine. I've got to work out how people do that. And so that's when I started working in the special needs school. And I couldn't believe what I could achieve with these kids. It's a secondary school. So they went from 11, they joined at 11, and there was one kid I remember who hadn't spelt a word in 9 months in school, and I got him spelling dinosaur, and it was like in a few minutes, and it was just like there's a lovely story on my YouTube channel about him, but it was just so enlightening to be able to do something so easily for somebody else who'd been struggling all their life, and just to help them get over it.
Absolutely. And it would be fantastic within this if we can kind of share some of the tips, and not just the tips, but the strategies of, kind of the way that you're able to kind of do that. That would be wonderful. With regards to dyslexia then, do you have any strategies yourself that kind of help day-to-day activities that you kind of carry out? Because you're incredibly, I'd say, skilled at kind of helping others. Do you then relate some of those skills back to kind of helping yourself?
Well, I don't think I knew I'd got dyslexia until I started teaching other people. And people said to me, well, they're dyslexics, aren't they? And I went, well, that doesn't matter. They just can't spell, or they can't read. We can sort the spelling and reading. if they've still got some other dyslexic traits, well, that's the way it is, but most of dyslexia is about spelling, reading, comprehension, concentration, and everything else, and we can resolve all of those. Yeah. And in the last 22 years, which it is now, I have learned so much more about how to get this to work really, really, really well. And people don't fail. People always learn to see words. Some people might find it a tad more difficult than others. Adults find it a bit more difficult than kids, because kids are just open to trying anything.
Yeah.
Sorry, go on.
No, I was just saying that's interesting when we look at kind of learning, and you say, adults find it a little bit more kind of difficult. And is it because we're kind of trained and wired within our minds to do things a certain way? And
it's because of bad experiences. Okay. A lot of adults don't even want to try because they've been dyslexic all their lives. They've got loads and loads of horror stories of what happened to them in school, and they don't want to go near it.
Yeah.
But it's completely different. Visualizing words or visualizing anything is a fun occupation. If I asked you to see a green elephant with pink stripes, you probably have.
Yeah.
You just watch.
Very unusual, but yeah, I've just visualized it.
Exactly. So dyslexics have this amazing ability to see pictures, however ridiculous the pictures are. Yeah. And so all you do is you start teaching them how to see words in their pictures.
So I've always said, being dyslexic myself, I see everything. I also use the analogy, I see everything in pictures. And so to some people get that and they say, oh, yeah, I know, what you're talking about. And in other ways, they think, well, what do you mean you see everything in pictures? But I do. And how does visualization then kind of work and play a part in what you kind of teach? How do you kind of break down that with your students and the people that you're teaching?
I would say 99% of the students are great visualizers. So they've already got great pictures. Some of them have great pictures for recall, and some of them have great pictures for imagination. So, for example, when I said to you, see an elephant with pink stripes or whatever it was, you would recall an elephant, and then you start painting pink stripes on it, all done in a flash. Yeah. And so that's how you create pictures. And all of these kids, one of the things that you find, and I'm sure you've found this when you've been talking about dyslexia, is they're very creative people.
Indeed.
And so all I did was go, if they're very creative people who've got great mental images, then why can't we use them for putting words in? It's exactly the same thing. And I could not believe how easy it was.
Sorry, please go on.
That's right. And we've over the last 22 years, we've got it better and better and better. And now I've moved on to ADHD. And again, that's another, contrary to popular belief, I've been studying some work of Gabor Mate, which is absolutely fascinating. And again, it's a skill that we haven't learnt when we were very young. So this all comes back. And this is why I love working with small children, because it all comes back to what a small child's experience is under the age of 7.
Would you say then under the age of 7 is that their kind of minds are kind of, they can kind of absorb the knowledge that you're giving and they can be more creative? And how does that correlate?
Well, I say under the age of 7 because that's where they get diagnosed with dyslexia.
Okay.
And I don't believe anybody, we're either all born dyslexic or nobody's born dyslexic, whichever way you look at it. Because if we have this place in our brain called the word form area, which is just at the back of your brain here, and it's right next to where you have your pictures. So if I say to you, don't see an elephant, you've gone to the back of your brain where you keep all your pictures and seen an elephant, okay? Right next to it is something called the word form area, which a lovely researcher called Stanislav Dehaene back in the early 2000s identified as the place where you keep your words, which is right next to where you keep your pictures.
Wow.
So I had this stroke of genius, I'm embarrassed to say, that put the words on the pictures and see if people could visualize So I won't start with elephant with you, but if I started with a cat, for example, and ask you to put the word cat on a cat, then you can start, because you've already got a good occipital lobe for where the pictures are, you'll find it easy to have the word cat written on the side of cat.
Yes.
And then we just get longer and longer words, up to elephant and all sorts of things. And then we move on to words that have got no pictures.
Wow. That's really interesting how, because it does, within dyslexia, we always kind of say that we struggle with the words, it's kind of, struggle with spelling. And as we know, it's not just spelling, reading and writing, there are other attributes as well. But the actual, the word side of it, it can cause, a lot of problems, can't they? And to kind of join them up like that, I can see it can really kind of benefit the people that you're teaching.
And I think it's really important that people realise it's not your fault. This is not your fault as a kid that you've got something wrong with you. This is a teaching problem that nobody's teaching kids to visualise words. And in my 22 years of doing this, 100% of the dyslexics who I have met, and I must admit I've only met hundreds and thousands, are not visualising words reliably. 100% of them have never learned to visualise words reliably. So I think it's a no-brainer. We just teach them. Yeah. And then we see if they've still got dyslexia.
So does this help more because we do think of people with dyslexia has, I wouldn't say better visual, have better, visualization skills, but for me, as I mentioned, many times before, I see things in pictures, but I'm always really kind of thinking about the picture, then kind of the actual word that associates, with it.
I think you've just said it, actually. You were probably, creatives are so busy picturing pictures.
Yes.
They probably never think of picturing words.
Yeah.
And nobody teaches them. And so all you've got to do is teach them when they're really little to picture pictures and picture words.
So is this then when we're picturing the words then? Because I whenever I'm kind of picturing something, I always make it kind of grand and big or whatever it is, it's that kind of visualization of this. If we're actually trying to visualize the words, I sitting here now thinking, how am I going to visualize? I'm trying to make, say, the word cat more extravagant than, CAT. I'm trying to, either like color in the kind of the.
Oh, that's fine. You can do with whatever you like with it.
But it's.
You can have each. I had one lad in special needs school who insisted on having every single letter in a different color.
Wow.
He was just super creative. That was fine. I mean, I let them do what they like. But they get the principle that you can see words. And the thing is that you start off with words with pictures, because if I say to you, don't see a dog, you've probably now seen a dog. Yep. Because you've gone to the occipital lobe for a picture of a dog, which is your dog, or it might be multiple dogs or whatever. So it's automatic to go to the occipital lobe from a very young child. You recognize your parents at 6 weeks old. How do you do that? You've already got a picture of them in your head. And if mum comes in wearing a pink curly wig, you're going to cry because that's not your mother.
Yeah.
So you've already got this wonderful technique in your brain at 6 weeks old to go and see pictures. So my attitude was, well, let's put the words on the pictures. Not underneath them, not above them, not on the other side of the card, on them, so that you get the two together. Because you don't want to have to put two images together. Just one image of a cat with CAT written on it, in any colour you like.
You're absolutely right. And when we do put a picture up, we put the words adjacent to it, don't we? We either underneath, so we, and it is that separation, isn't it? We say, that's the picture, and that's that's what it's called, or that's the word that's previous,
And then the poor kid's got two pictures to hold on to together. And the picture of the word, when you're very young, has no meaning at all. Yeah. It's only the picture of the picture that does.
So how do we break down? So say we have a word like hippopotamus, and I don't know where this is created, where this kind of word comes from. I'm sorry for putting you on the spot. Do we then break the? I mean,
you can or you don't need to.
Yeah.
What you do is you learn. The way we teach is you learn 3-letter words, 4-letter words, 5-letter words, 6-letter words, until your brain is going, oh, right, this is the way we're doing things. And then you can move on to words which are really long, like hippopotamus, but using exactly the same technique. Yeah. You can break it down if you want to, or you can do it in one picture. One of the lads I taught in special needs school was an obsessor on dinosaurs.
Yeah.
And he managed to spell the first word he ever spelled in school, well, actually, I think in his life, because he was 11, was Tyrannosaurus. I tried to get him to spell T-Rex, but he was obsessed by dinosaurs. He was autistic, and he came out with Tyrannosaurus. And I'm sitting there absolutely spellbound. He hadn't spelt a word in school. And so what you do is you just get bigger and bigger words as objects, and then you move over to non-objects, which we have a nifty trick for, and you start with short words and you get longer and longer words. And very soon your brain goes, this is the way we're doing things, but you have to do practice. You know, like anything else you want to achieve in the world, you have to practice. But my mission in life, I think, is to tell people they don't have to stay with not being able to spell and read. There is a very simple skill they can learn, which is learnt in minutes for the really creative people, that they can learn to spell and read. Dyslexics shouldn't have to live with not being able to spell and read. I mean, when I was a kid, I never read a word. Sorry, I'll say that again. When I was a kid, I never read for pleasure. I got myself a maths degree because we didn't have to read very much, and I could do maths. But I was, sorry, I've lost my train of thought.
No. You're talking about reading for pleasure. You always read.
Oh, that's right. And so, and whereas now I can read a book that I'm really interested in a weekend.
Wow.
And before I wouldn't even pick up a book. And if I did have to read one for school, then I would be asleep within 2 pages.
Olive, I'm so sorry to interrupt on that, but you've just hit the kind of a really kind of a subject which I would love to kind of know if you know the answer. You just said about reading and then you would be asleep within kind of 2 pages. I can relate to that massively in the sense of whenever I start reading, it naturally makes me feel really tired.
Well, it's how much effort are you putting into actually decoding the words?
Yeah.
That's exhausting you. So you are going to be asleep.
It does. But you're absolutely right. It is that kind of that correlation to picking up the book and reading. You know, those 2, 3, 4 pages. If I can get through those, they seem. You know, I almost kind of start off and I'm thinking, oh, actually, I'm getting to grips with this. I'm understanding the story. There's a bit of a plot, and then it then just becomes kind of like a bit of a real kind of uphill struggle. And then it's a case of just got to shut the book and rest. It's
totally.
Really.
And of course, when you're young, that gets translated into I hate reading.
Because when we're in class, if you look at, say, a traditional lesson, that's, take a normal secondary school day or even primary school day, say secondary school day, you have, the hours, say 9 and 3 in the UK. And then you have, obviously break times and things, but each lesson's about an hour. And if you're having to kind of concentrate for an hour, say reading a certain textbook or something, that can be incredibly exhausting if you haven't got those tools to do those. And then that sets up for the rest of the day, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
And just obviously having those tools where you're able to kind of help yourself kind of dissect it, I guess, so that it's manageable. You feel that could really kind of help?
Well, I think I'm a reformed dyslexic now because I can spell, I can read really well, I still am a bit disorganized. So I've got a few of the little traits of dyslexia, but the spelling and reading is it has gone away.
Yeah.
Just like that.
What would you like to see? What would you like to see more kind of, because we're not stopping kind of in schools, this could be colleges, universities, even, kind of workplaces as well. What would you like to see going forward with kind of the methods that you teach?
First of all, I think I should say something about research.
Please do.
Because most people go, what research is that? Well, I found this out in the 1990s. And there was, where I learned NLP, the guy had done a lot of research, and there was two other people. So there was three people who'd done research into this, and two of them were in universities. And they proved that people who are good at literacy visualize words. In the early 2000s, a couple of neuroscientists joined in and said, we know where this is going on in your brain. And so that was Stanislav Lehane I just mentioned, and I've forgotten the other lady's name. But they both came up with what you need to do is fill up the word form area. So I don't care what version of spelling or reading people are teaching. That is not the question. All that's important is that you start filling up your word form area, which, by the way, is empty when you're born, which is why I say, are we all born dyslexic? Because if we have nothing in our word form area, we are bound to be diagnosed dyslexic because we won't be fluent reading and we won't be fluent at spelling. This computer's just talking to me about updating itself. It's all right. I'll carry on. So now I've lost my train of thought. So
about our kind of memory bank and kind of our word bank.
Filling up the word form area is the only important thing in life. And, people will argue until the cows come home about how do you teach spelling and reading? And that's not the right question. The right question is, how do you get the word form area built up? And we have a very specific, very simple, very easy way of building up your word form area. And then as you read, you just you'll get more and more words in your word form area. But the important thing to understand is when you're born, you've got nothing in there and it doesn't exist. And so you've got to do some work to get words in there. So that's the first thing. Yeah. It ought to be taught in primary school to 4-year-olds. They're busy teaching phonics, which is fine for new words. But once you've seen a word 2 or 3 times, you ought to transfer to the word form area. And they're not teaching anybody this. And it's ridiculously simple to teach a 4-year-old, 5-year-old, 6-year-old. And then as they grow up, they just don't have the problem because they've been visualizing words all their lives. If you talk to somebody who isn't dyslexic and you say, you give them a difficult word to spell, like slightly like giraffe or something like that, and you go, do you visualize words? And they probably say no, because it's an unconscious habit. Yep. Whereas if you say, can you tell me how many R's and how many F's in giraffe? They'll start to look up and go, G-I-R-A-W. Oh, it's 1 R and 2 F's. And I did see the word.
Yes.
So when they're not totally confident, they will start looking up. You just have to give them really difficult words.
It's always, again, it's really fascinating to know not just how you're able to kind of teach and educate and help, but the research behind it and kind of the findings that you had.
The research was absolutely great, but it didn't tell you how to teach it.
Yes,
that's where I came in and went, hang on a minute, this is too important to let go, to leave to chance, which is what we were doing, and so we'll start teaching it. Yeah. And I would love you to get the message out to everybody that they can learn this skill. If I coach somebody, it typically takes 2 1-hour sessions. That's it. But they've got to practice.
Yes.
Because they need to move to the place where their brain suddenly goes, oh, this is what we're doing.
Yeah.
So like anything else, if you start playing tennis or squash or whatever, you've got to practice. You've got to practice with this.
Olive, we're coming up to our kind of time, but I could talk to you all day. I'm always incredibly fascinated with different ways to kind of help people with dyslexia be able to do things that they struggle with the reading and the writing side of it. It's been absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much for coming on and speaking with us today. And we will catch up with you very soon. Thank you so much indeed for your time.
Very good. Thank you very much for inviting me. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.